Hello, my fellow movie fans, and welcome to another show of Feast of Films Theatre, today starring Matthew Black and Ethan R. Hill. There, that's the intro.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Hello, my fellow movie fans, and welcome to another episode of A Feast of Films. I'm Ethan R. Hill, and with me, as always, is...
Matt Black, what's going on, my fellow movie fans?
We are here today to talk to you guys about, and talk to each other about, Star Wars Episode 2. It's another special episode.
Hell yeah!
How excited are you, Matt? How excited are you for Episode 2?
Can you not tell? I'm 100% ecstatic. This is my favorite Star Wars movie of all time. Hands down. It is the best one. No one can even argue with me. Way better than Empire Strikes
Well, just
Back.
that love,
way better
that
than
love
Return
story,
of the Jedi.
The love story between Anakin and Padme is just so much better than Han and Leia.
It just puts it to shame.
I know. It's such a natural progression. They really
and not creepy at all.
No,
not creepy at all. Not even a little bit.
They really captured the essence of what a real man should do when pursuing a woman. I felt like.
Jesus. Oh, I am episode. I like the sarcasm there, man. That was great. No, episode 2 is not my favorite Star Wars film, but I am interested in talking about it. And we were talking a little bit before too. I'm interested to see your thoughts and hear my thoughts and see exactly how this is all going to play out. I'm more interested for the conversation than I am the movie, to be honest.
You want to know the crazy thing about this, though?
Yeah.
Honestly, Episode 2, growing up, was probably my favorite Star Wars film, but that's probably, because, when did Episode 2 come out? In 2002? So we were about
that's
11 or so.
11, yep.
And that's when I really started to get into movies and bonus features. Really into watching the DVDs, behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. And Episode 2 is one that, honestly, I watched so much. It was bouncing between X-Men 2 and Star Wars Episode 2, a lot of 2s growing up. But
right.
I used to love it. And it almost was to a point where I could have probably not watched it and more than likely had the exact same conversation. But I rewatched it, so I had some notes, so I actually know what I want to talk about. But it's so ingrained in my brain that I don't I don't think it's one of those ones I don't think I ever need to watch. When we popped it on the player.
Yeah.
We found out that we had stopped watching it right when Yoda and Dooku are fighting. And it's okay, why did we stop there? And then rewatching it, we got to that fight and we're like, oh, this is why we stopped. Okay. All right. And it's not that stuff is bad, but when you reach that point in the movie, there's nothing more. He fights Dooku and then Dooku runs and that's the movie. You don't need anything else after. That's basically the end. And it just
more or less.
Rewatching it, it's just okay, so this is why I don't visit this one that often.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I'm gonna say for now. Yeah.
Well, and it's because of the crunch time and stuff. I did watch it at 1.5 speed. And honestly, it felt like the exact same movie. Nothing was missing.
It didn't even change.
No, it didn't, and that's massively problematic, I think. And maybe we'll get into it a bit more, but I can't believe that. I have a really hard time that I condensed that as much as I did, and I skipped a few scenes, and I'm I don't need to watch that because I know what happens in it. And it was mostly Anakin and Padme. I'll be honest. It was mostly that. So it's it's Episode 2.
Episode 2.
Before we get into that, maybe we should start with something that might be a little more happy fun times. Matt, what's the question of the day?
Happy fun times. That's right. We're moving on to the question of the day. If you guys also have a question of the day, let us know down below in the comments, right? And we're gonna incorporate that into a video. Probably.
Well, if anyone actually gives us questions of the day, then we would. But no one's given us one yet.
questions of the day, leave them down below. All right, let's get to the question of the day for today. I had a hard time not coming up with this one. I actually have like a list of specifically Star Wars ones for our Star Wars episodes, and I'm like trying to decide which one I want to ask is the hardest thing, because I got some decent ones, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go with the simple answer, the more difficult answer. It's a hard choice. But here's the one I'm going with today, because we have plenty more Star Wars to go. So the one I'm going with today is, how would you watch the Star Wars saga? In what order would you watch the Star Wars saga? What is the correct way? That's what I'm asking. That's the bit.
I have that figured out. Like, I already know, because it's...
What is the correct way?
I always have a plan for if I ever encounter someone who's never seen Star Wars, like how I show them. And to me, the answer is how it came out. You show 4, 5, 6, then you show 1, 2, and 3, and then you show 7, 8, and 9. And that way, too, like, the spin-offs you can choose whenever. Like, that's whatever. But to me, the whole reason why I think that's the best way to show them is you can at least show them the good ones first, because arguably that original trilogy are the best. And you can show them what a taste of Star Wars is, and hopefully they at least understand that, and they can decide if they don't want to watch any more past those first 3, that's fine, because at the end of the day, I don't need to show them the prequels or the sequels, as long as I get them to see those 3 main films. Whereas if I start them with episode 1 and they're like, this is terrible, am I going to get them to watch 4, 5, and 6? Like, sitting there for 2 other movies being like, no, wait, it gets better, I swear, and it's 2 more movies before it gets to, like, where Star Wars was. So to me, like, and it makes sense, like, again, and maybe it differs from person to person. Like, if someone grew up watching 1, 2, and 3 first, and then seeing 4, 5, 6, because I know that's happened to people, maybe that's the way they'd prefer to show it. But for me personally, it's 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9. Like, and you can watch spin-offs in The Mandalorian in any order. If you want to show someone The Mandalorian first, I think that wouldn't be a bad idea either, because, like,
that's a great way to get people involved in Star Wars.
But I also don't want to disappoint them when you show them stuff that's nothing like The Mandalorian. You're like,
this is Star Wars, and over here.
Exactly, and it's
and here's Attack of the Clones. Look,
and that's
what.
And that's kind of my.
Then someone would be like, "Is that The Mandalorian?" Shut up. It's not.
Yes, it's the exact same. They're all the same person. I mean, never mind. It's a cloning thing, so it totally could. Yeah. Anyway, I know there's some people who, like, have the crazy one where it's like you show them 4 or 5, and then you skip to 2 and 3, and then you go back to 6, and that's how you show them. Like, you cut out 1 completely, because then it shows, like, you still get that reveal of Darth Vader, and then the backstory, and then the conclusion, but, like, you don't need the backstory for that conclusion.
Right.
Like, that's my feelings. How about you, Matt? How do you...
I've been bouncing back and forth on this one. This has been a tough one to figure out, because I am trying to figure out what order do I show Maximus these movies so it's the most, like, impact to him as a child, you know, ideally growing up. That's been, like, my biggest question in trying to figure this whole thing out. Like, not who I'd recommend it to as, like, a grown-ass adult, but, like, as a kid showing for the first time Star Wars. What do I show him? And I debated doing it the way that you suggested by release. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
And to me, I think just because of the time we live in, I don't know if 4, 5, and 6 will have the same effect. Narratively, they would. But as far as, like, the visuals of it all, right? Because it's definitely dated. It's definitely aged. Like, we all know that when we watch these movies, they came out in the 70s and 80s. Like, we're all well aware of that. We're not expecting, like, Thanos and his army to show up with CGI craziness, right? And that's not even what we want out of it. That's not what we want. We wouldn't want that anyway. But I was just wondering if it wouldn't hold up, like, visually, like, get them excited as it did back in the day. And then the other thing is, for me, like, I know there was a big thing when, it, you know, no, I am your father. Like, how that was such a big moment, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, you gotta watch the original so you don't know Vader's the father. And then it's a big surprise. And I'm like, would it be a surprise, though, nowadays? That's my biggest question, because everybody knows, no, I am your father, or Luke, I am your father. Like, it's such a thing that's commonly spread around, like even by people who don't watch Star Wars.
You bring up a pretty good point, though. Like, a pretty good So you're going to be showing this to Max, I'm assuming, by the time he's like 5, right?
Probably somewhere around there.
So as a 5-year-old, is he going to know that, and is he going to realize that, or do you have a chance to really get him with a what if you don't have any context to that? Because I didn't have context to that.
Yeah, that's true.
And
here's the other thing too, though. Here's my other like area of debate that like debates that one specific area, and you guys can like decide, or if you agree with me or not. It's totally up to each one how you want to watch these movies. But I'm like, wouldn't the impact of Anakin actually falling to the dark side, the hero turning into the villain, be more impactful than the fact that he's the actual father? Like, if they would have got released in a different order, right? And the I'm your father wasn't the big reveal, but the big reveal was
Anakin,
this hero that you've been following turns out to actually succumb to the dark side. I'm like, wouldn't that be more of the bigger impact?
I think as a children's movie, yes. As a movie for kids, yes, because, again, it's the person you identify with. It's Anakin. You see that happen, you're like, oh, but I wanted to be him, what? But as an adult, I personally think the I'm your father is a bigger reveal. Because, like, and it comes down to even just how the movies are handled. There's a more maturity to episode 4, 5, and 6 than there is 1, 2, and 3.
For sure. Hands down, yeah. Hands down.
Like, in all honesty, like, as bad as it might sound, if you're looking to show it to someone who likes modern movies, honestly, starting with Force Awakens isn't a bad place to start either. And I'm not saying start with Force Awakens and then go to episode 8 and 9 right away. But Force Awakens has a really good tone to it that feels like Star Wars, and it also has a really decent structure and story to it. And it also has really good effects that still hold up, because even like the CG from the 90s and the 2000s doesn't necessarily hold up. Like, yeah. I'd argue that the practical effects from 4, 5, and 6 hold up more. But maybe
definitely on some scenes way more, yeah.
And like that's where to me, like if you're looking at it from just even like whether someone's gonna enjoy like from a modern audience standpoint or not, that's where a part of me thinks that maybe episode 7 wouldn't be bad. Because you could still do it that way, where you could do episode 7 and then hop back to 4, 5, and 6, and then hop back to 1, 2, and 3, and then watch Last Jedi.
That sounds like a mess.
That's the problem with the Star Wars franchise. It is a mess, and that's because they're also tonally different.
Yeah.
By trilogy, not
every trilogy, yeah.
Because like but here's also my problem too. When you look at going from episode 1 to episode 2. Tonally, they're very different, more different than I remembered. Phantom Menace to Attack, just there's a disconnect, and maybe it's less of a disconnect to episode 3, or maybe it's disconnected because again we've only watched the first 2, and maybe that third one just makes it all feel like one cohesive journey, but like it's still a massive disconnect between between those 3 movies. Not story-wise, there's that clear arc, but tonally.
Yeah.
Whereas, actually, talking about the sequel trilogy, tonally, they're connected. I would say they feel like they're in the same universe and all that kind of stuff, episode 7, 8, and 9. Story-wise, they're completely disjointed, though.
I could see that.
Whereas this one's...
I get kind of what you're saying. And I don't know if I 100% agree, but I get what you're saying.
Well, of course, there's going to be different tones because different directors in episodes 7, 8, and 9.
For sure, yeah.
But to me, story is kind of the part where that franchise, or that segment of the franchise failed more. Whereas...
Yeah, that trilogy.
Whereas this one, it's just they're trying... And, like, again, I get it, and it's revolutionary, and I support it. But it's because they were trying to, like, be revolutionary that really... It fell flat. Because, like, with the original Star Wars, they were being revolutionary out of necessity. Because they needed to. They needed to push the envelope for the original trilogy. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, they could have made films the same way everyone else was making films. You could 100% make Star Wars films like you did in the 80s, because guess what? You made them like that in the 80s. 20 years difference isn't going to change anything. But the idea that they push so much for the digital sets in this movie and all that kind of stuff really dates it. It really, really dates it. And that's where just like they were being revolutionary for the sake of it, not because it was the best thing to be, but because they could do it. It's they didn't think enough about whether they should do it, and they thought were so focused on whether they could do it that they didn't stop to think whether they should.
They should.
Which brings me
Fair enough.
I want to ask a bonus question of the day to you, Matt. I want to carry through a tradition. Episode 2, who would you replace with Jeff Goldblum?
Nice. Who would I replace with Jeff Goldblum? Honestly, I think I would replace... I think I'd have to replace Anakin. Honestly, like, Hayden Christensen is just like it's a rough performance. He's not a bad guy, but he's not a great actor, and the performance isn't that, especially in this one, not very strong.
Again,
I think Jeff Goldblum would be hilarious as an Anakin.
And I think that's the thing is, the only two people I think who could actually make it work is Jeff Goldblum and Nicolas Cage. They're the only two people I think.
Oh yeah, like a Nicolas Cage.
And that's it. But the thing is, you're 100% right though. It wouldn't be good. It wouldn't because it'd be good. It would be because it's funny.
I don't think it'd be good. It'd be hilarious. Yeah.
And like, I'm gonna literally steal my answer from last time, except for it's instead of battle droids, the clones. Like everyone is just a clone of Jeff Goldblum.
Just a whole bunch of Jeff Goldblums, man.
Yeah. Or even like, you know what? Even if he was like, no, because I really like. I was gonna say, what about Senator Organa? But I really like. I think it's Jimmy Schmitz. Schmitz is his name.
Yeah, I think so.
I really like him, and I wanted more of him. And then when we did get more of him, it was okay. But like, he's good. He's really good. Like, but no, I think I'm gonna go with the clones because I think that would just be also, it would just enhance it.
I would have to agree with you on that one. That's pretty good.
So
I think Anakin and the clones, Django obviously would then have to be a Goldblum. Boba Fett would be a little Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, no, it's just
great.
It's just Jeff Goldblum, but on his knees with like shoes attached to his feet.
But like little, yeah.
But like, could you imagine even like the banter between Django and Obi-Wan with Jeff Goldblum and Ewan McGregor?
Oh man, that'd be good.
They've never been in a movie together, have they?
I don't think so.
Oh, man.
Not off the top of my head that I can think of.
I'm going to quickly Google this because...
Also, while you're Googling that, I don't think I even answered my own question. I think I asked you a couple more questions. Honestly, my preferred way to watch it, like for myself personally, I like watching it in chronological order. I like watching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because I love like the generation gap in between and like the transition to that instead of going backwards, like the forward progress. And then I stop at 6 and I don't watch 7, 8, 9. So
yeah, I'll still watch 7, 8, 9.
Dude, man, my ideal way is to not watch 7, 8, 9 anymore. To me, that's a damn shame because I actually enjoyed 7 and 8. I just dislike 9 so much that it literally ruins that first 2 movies. So I'm just like, I don't even think I can watch the trilogy because I know watching the first movie, I'll just be like, oh, I know where this is gonna end. Nowhere important. So,
but isn't that...
What's the point then? What's the point?
Isn't that the Star Wars way, is to not end in anything?
But I mean, I guess, whatever.
So, yeah.
We're not talking about those movies yet.
So they were in the very successful and critically acclaimed movie Mordecai together.
I have never heard of that movie.
It's that one with Johnny Depp as, like, that kind of detective-like character, I think, like a bumbling detective. Oh no, he's a art dealer and swindler. I've never seen the movie. I just know...
I've never even heard of the movie.
The trailer looked mildly entertaining, and then it was just not, like, it got panned across the board.
It was just not that entertaining.
Oh yeah, no, it was not well received. And I haven't watched it yet. It's been on my list for years because I want to know... You know those movies that come out that are like so bad, or you hear they're so bad that you need to see them because it's
that
like,
you want to watch it? Yeah.
That's one of them. That's been on the list for a while. I just haven't had the courage to actually pull the trigger on that.
To actually go and do it.
But, I don't know, man. I like your answer, but I for some reason it's that original trilogy for me, man. Like, always, that's gonna be it. That's, if I had to pick any section of Star Wars to watch, it would just be that. Like, if I had to give up every other thing that's come out, episode 4 to 6, that's all I need. I don't need the expanded universe. I don't need the video games. I don't need comic books. I don't need the other 6 to 10 movies. I don't need The Mandalorian. I love that stuff because it's extra Star Wars, but to me, those 3 films make or break that franchise.
Well, they're always, and they are, and they did make the franchise. So they, arguably they did not break it. Obviously, they made the franchise.
Well, maybe they did break it because no films have been as good since.
But they are the heart of Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
They're the heart of Star Wars. And I think it's important for Star Wars to change and grow too. Like, I love the original movies, but I also enjoy the prequels for what they are. Excluding episode 2 for the most part, you know what I mean? But, like, because they were such a different setting, and it was such a different time, and I appreciated that. Like, the one thing, again, that I really dislike about the sequel trilogy is, like, man, you guys, you're trying so hard to just live in the shadows of the originals. Instead of creating your own voice and doing your own thing. Like, everything just had to be so...
But I think
we're like the originals, but nowhere near as good.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, and I think upon reflection, like, honestly, 10 to 20 years, I think your opinion and my opinion might change on the sequels. Because at the end of the day, I think you're right, and I think the sequels, just like the prequels are, they're a product of their time. The problem is the time that they're in, we're in right now. So we don't necessarily see that, but I guarantee you, give us another 10 to 20 years, and, like, my roommate's been saying this for a while. He's like, I bet you that people are gonna, like, especially the generation coming up with the sequel series,
with these movies,
they're gonna be exactly how a lot of people our age are with the prequel series, where, like, the prequel series is like, and honestly, I'll speak to this a little bit about episode 2, but it's good because you grew up with it. That's why you still love it. That's why that you have that special place in your heart, right? Regardless of how good the movies are. And I think that's even, like, a lot of movies that me and you grew up with as kids. Like, we can admit, like, Casper the Friendly Ghost wasn't a great movie, but we probably both enjoyed it, like, when we were kids. And we going back and watching it, there's still that, like, nostalgia filter where you're like, oh, I did like this. I've
honestly never gone back to watch it, so I can't say.
I did a few years ago, and I don't remember much of it, but I just remember Bill Pullman.
It was that good,
Bill Pullman's in it, and I love him. But, yeah, for me, it's just, like, I think the sequel trilogy is going to need some time. And that's where I'm also curious whenever we get to Rogue One. I'm super curious if my opinion's going to change on it or not. Because I know it's been 4 years.
It's been a while,
so maybe I'll like it after 4 years of watching it, or not watching it. Or maybe I'm still going to be a smart person and dislike it because it's not a good Star Wars movie. But that's a conversation for a different podcast.
Exactly. And yeah, maybe you're right about the sequels. I'm still in the camp that, like, disjointed and poor storytelling and poor planning is 20 years later still disjointed, still poor storytelling. Oh no, you know what I mean? But like, I agree. Like, I don't think that part changes. Whether people like it again or not, yeah, you make a good point.
As for watching,
maybe
to counter your point, the prequels are a good example of it doesn't change, but your opinion on it does, because there's a lot of disjointed, not great storytelling in the prequels. Like, there is.
Nowhere near as much as the sequels, though. That's a cohesive idea in the story.
So here's...
The sequels are all over the place.
But here's my counter to that, though. Most of the stuff most of the stuff for the prequel series, where they're all over the place, is spread out throughout 3 movies. Whereas with... and I'll shoot myself in the foot here by just saying specifically, like, about Rise of Skywalker versus Last Jedi. But the way that they were going, as much as I disliked the way they were going in Last Jedi, there was still kind of a cohesive way. Kind of. And then all of that stuff that was, like, all of that stuff that made zero sense, that was spread over the, like, or, like, the prequel trilogy, all that stuff, like, that just, like, is a lot of head-scratching, that spread over 3 movies, was condensed, all that head-scratching was condensed into one movie with Rise of Skywalker. And that's why I think it's such a visceral reaction, because we didn't have, like, 9 years to be like, okay. Instead, it was like, 6 years for the whole thing, which is still ridiculous to me. I don't know why they condensed it, even by like cutting off. I think if they would have used the 3 years to actually spread out the timing, the movies would have turned out better. But it was 2 years of like, all right, cool. Like Force Awakens, okay, it's a good starting point. Okay, Last Jedi, I don't like what they did, but at least it's different. And then it was literally the third chapter. As much as I love it, it's a lot of okay for the entire movie. And that's the problem. Is like, again, it's that 9 years condensed into literally 2 hours of head scratching.
I think you make a point there. I also think with 9 too, it's not just like small little one-off weird things to the side. It's like major plot points and story arcs that completely change or completely go in a completely different direction or completely wrong. And I think that's where it stands out more.
Here's a question for you. This is actually tying to Rogue One. Did Jin's father design the Death Star in Rogue One?
Yeah, you know what? I had the thought of that too when we were watching episode 2. And you see the little Death Star design, right?
And they've begun building it by the end of episode 3.
Yeah. So I don't think he designed it. I think he was the lead engineer. I'd have to watch it again. Because I just noticed that.
And it's like, no, wait. Like I thought they credited him saying it was his whole thing, and then Krennic stole it from him, and then Tarkin stole the credit from Krennic, and it's like, but this doesn't... What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know.
Rogue One makes me upset. I think we've just established that pretty well already.
Yeah, I honestly have no answer for you. When we get to Rogue One and we'll watch it again, then I'll keep an eye out for that. Because I can't remember specifically if they said he designed the whole thing, or if he just was the engineer and he included a weak point.
That still makes me so mad. That still makes me so mad. It still makes me so angry. But that's, again...
Yeah, that doesn't really bug me. It makes sense to me.
And I have reasons and stuff like that. But we'll talk about that in a different...
Okay, reasons there. Captain Reasons.
I'm really glad we picked up on the exact same thing, though. I'm really happy that we're both like, hey...
Oh, yeah. Wait. Like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like... Because I totally forgot the Death Star plans were in episode 2. And then all of a sudden they had it, and I was like, wait a minute. I thought the other guy built it. Then I was like, maybe he didn't. I don't know now. So now it's, definitely something I have to think about.
Now I need to watch Rogue One, and I don't like that.
I'll watch it for you and let you know.
Well, if you want, we can really stretch this podcast out, and we can do like, so we do the trilogy, or we do the prequel trilogy, then we do the spin-offs, then we do the original trilogy, then we do the Mandalorian, but we do an episode per podcast. So we get like 8 podcasts out of that. And then we can also include the Ewok movies if we want to as well in there, you know, just throw that like the Endor not great movies. When are we going to talk about the holiday special, Matt?
Dude.
And then we can eventually get to the sequels in about 20 years.
If I do my calculations right, it'll be about 20 years. Whatever keeps us back from the sequels longer.
That's the plan because like every five episodes.
No, I'm actually honestly more interested to talk about Star Wars when we get to the sequels, because I think Force Awakens we agree on for the most part.
Yeah.
And Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, we're both on the opposite camps, I think, for the most part. So I'm just interested because like I just love having these conversations where you get to go back and forth, debate a little bit, and maybe one person changes their mind, maybe we both stay in our camp. But like it's just interesting. Those are great conversations to me.
I personally always hope that instead of just staying in our camps, we can at least see where the other person is coming from and possibly reach more of a middle ground of understanding and being like, you know what? You're right.
That's the goal, man. That's the goal. But we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, man. So,
but you know, should we start talking about episode 2 now?
I think so. I think that was a good question of the day. I liked that. I think that really opened up. That really
a whole can of worms.
Yeah,
Space worms
out of asteroids and stuff.
Do they live in cans? Yeah, I was gonna say a whole asteroid full of space worms. There we go. Bam. Oh, bam. Anyway.
So I guess let's go and start talking about episode 2. So Matt, how did you feel about Star Wars episode 2, Attack of the Clones?
Do you want like my overall thoughts, or should we just start going point to point kind of thing? Start at the beginning, work our way through. What do you want to do, man?
Let's overall just like a quick overall. How did the movie make you feel? And then we'll get into our points. Like how was your viewing experience?
Okay, fair. This movie, and I was kind of talking to you a little bit also beforehand about this as well. I said it's not as bad as I remember, but also it is simultaneously worse than I remember. It depends on what part in the film you're actually in.
Yep.
Some things I'm like, okay, that wasn't as bad as I remember. There's other parts that I'm like, this is terrible. Like, this is terrible. So overall, my filming experience was pretty middle. Like, again, I don't think it's the worst Star Wars has to offer. It definitely isn't the best. But, you know, it's just... It's more of a technical... What's the word I'm looking for? It's a tech show. It's more of a tech show than it honestly is a movie.
But not a good tech show.
No, not... The CGI isn't great in a lot of the scenes. But, like, the set pieces are fun. They're very good. They're, like, well designed. The CGI is old and lacking, right? But the set pieces were fine. But, like, the movie and the story itself in between those set pieces is where this movie lacks and starts falling apart and drags. And that's where all the weaknesses really are. And that's something when you're saying, yeah, no, the story is the weakness of the film. Like, when the story is the weakness of the film, it's arguably not that great of a film. You can still have fun with it, but it's arguably, like, you ain't watching this movie for the story. You ain't watching it for the story. So that's just kind of how I feel. Like, I'm very middle ground on it. It can be enjoyable in parts, and there's other parts that are absolutely terrifying. But it's just... It's not a great movie, but it isn't the worst thing either. So I'm very, 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 like, just completely middle ground on it. How was your viewing experience?
So it was a lot worse than I remember it being.
Yeah, I figured you'd slide a little bit more to that end.
Yeah. I watched it at 1.5 speed because I'm an irresponsible person and left it to the last minute. I literally finished watching it about like 2 hours ago. Like that is, but it's such a weird feeling for me watching it because there are a lot of complaints about the movie. There's a lot, like, even my notes, like, there's positives that I do like about this movie, but I have a lot more complaints about it. But even with all the complaints, I still get such a positive feeling in my body from watching it. Like, I have no idea why, because I'm watching this movie, and even to take it back to last week, I'm watching a movie that is objectively not a good movie. And subjectively, I don't like this movie. But there's something inside of me that makes me feel like I like this movie. Like, I'm watching it, and my brain's literally like, I hate this. I don't like this. Why am I still watching this? But my body's just having this tingly, like, so much nostalgia. And, like, that's the only way I can explain it, is it's a nostalgia feeling. Where it's just, like, it's got this warmth of, like, just these memories of me watching it when I was younger.
Yeah, especially if you watched it a lot, too. Yeah.
And I did. I watched it, like, all the time. Like, it's one of those ones of, like, I could probably quote it more than I can episode 3 or any other ones, but, like, it was such a weird feeling. And honestly, the 1.5 speed did not change much. Like, the performances were still, like, the action was more intense. That was cool.
I guess so, yeah.
But, like,
a lot faster.
But there was like, nothing was missing when I put it at 1.5 speed. There was nothing that suddenly was like, oh man, I really wish this moment was longer. But there was a couple of moments where I did, like, a lot of the Obi-Wan stuff, I put it down to regular speed for a little bit, just because, like, I love anything with Obi-Wan in it.
Well, let's be honest. Ewan McGregor was still great.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he still did a great job. His performance was still good. And, like, his story arc wasn't that interesting, but at least his performances were still top-notch.
It wasn't that interesting, but it was more interesting than whatever the heck they were doing with Padme and Anakin. Like,
well, okay, let's be clear about that. Yeah.
Do we want to get into our notes, or do we want to, like... Because, like,
Yeah, I've
So,
been,
like,
as you guys can see, we're taking it very casual this time around and just seeing how this goes. But I
So-
don't know, take it from the top. What do you think?
so right out the gate, like so we started watching it last night, and then I had a surprise visitor, and my night got derailed, and that's a whole thing. But so I started watching it, and I got 2 minutes in. And I was immediately, and that's so like 2 minutes in, including the crawl. So like the crawl was gone, but I got really.
So this is 2 minutes after the
No,
crawl.
this is including the crawl.
Oh, including
So this
the
is
crawl.
this
Okay.
is maybe a minute in,
a minute into like the actual.
and I got
right.
really happy and really angry within that minute because
I think I know what you're talking about. Let keep going.
first
Keep
and
going.
foremostly,
I wanna see.
I personally love the designs of the Naboo starfighters, of any of their starships. I love those designs, and it cheeses me off so much that Battlefront didn't ever have a Naboo level for fighting, and like there's not enough love for the starfighters, and even like just the ship designs from the Naboo. I love the way they look. They're so sleek, they're so shiny, they're so like just they just are pleasing to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get inside the ship, and it's Padme standing there talking to, the guy, being like, hey, we'll be at Coruscant soon. And she responds in Padme's voice. However, that's not Padme. Why is this body double talking with Padme's voice when no one else is around? This decoy doesn't need to be sounding like Padme. She doesn't after she gets blown up. So, but why? Who's that for? You want to know who's that for? That's for the audience. That's for us to be like,
Yeah, well, that's exactly
no,
what that's for.
Padme got blown up. But like, no, like that's not like, you didn't even need to have a line. You could have just had her like, him come and say that, and then you cut back outside and they land.
Yeah.
It bugged me. It bugged me because like I understand why they're doing it. I get it, but it doesn't make any sense at all, in the slightest. Period. So like that was within the 2 minutes, and then to top it off too, like while the ship designs look good, the CG right out the gate does not look good. Like the ships look weird, and it looks like but I guess that's saying a lot for today. Maybe it's comparing it to today's CG, but like it looked like modern video games, or slightly worse than a modern video game. Like when you see the ships and when you see stuff like that, like it doesn't. Mm-hmm. There was no texture to it. It was just flat. But that was
I would agree. I really enjoy how you just have such a you have such a thing against Padme and her body doubles. Like that was like a whole thing for you in episode 1. Like, who is this for? Why are we doing this?
Because it's not that hard of a concept
It's
to
bullshit.
It's
like,
not that hard to do.
And then this one 10 seconds and that goddamn body double. Like you just have like,
because
I
again,
love how you just have a hate on for the body doubles. Man, it kills me.
who's it for?
I think that's
Who's
so
it
funny.
for?
That's so funny. But to your point, okay, fair enough. But your point and my point were totally different right off the bat. Mine was mainly the CGI. I was like, the CGI was really rough, like right off the start. The ships weren't even the biggest issue for me. It was the exterior of the planet Coruscant. Like when they're flying towards Coruscant and then the ship's getting down towards the planet. It's like, you can tell that's like a PNG file, man. That shit's flat. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like it ain't like a planet. There's no, and even when Dooku, I think, goes back to it, it's the same thing. Like there's no 3D layering to it. Like the clouds aren't higher slightly. Like it's just very, like it looks like just an image.
Which,
like if I would just take an image, put it on the computer, and just have a camera go over the image, that's what it looks like.
Which when matte paintings have more depth to them than your CG rendered environment, that's a problem. Because matte paintings are still used to this day, and it looks fine. It looks great, but again, it
just lacked any sort of dimension. It was so flat, and like, man, I get it. CGI was rough back then, and I guess the whole kind of CGI image looking thing worked well when you're in a planet and you just have to do a skyline kind of backdrop, right?
Yeah.
Like if something's just flat up inside down, and it's far away, you don't need that like depth necessarily, or that doesn't matter as much.
When you're moving
you
across,
get the idea. But when you're moving across it at that angle, like above, and you can see like where a planet should have depth to it, and it's just flat, like that was really, really bad. And that was like the first shot of the movie. You're like, ooh, this is not aged well. But yeah, you can tell right off the bat from this movie, there's going to be way more CGI in it. Like, right off the start, you're like, oh yeah, there's going to be a ton of CGI. But that's what I noticed right away, and it wasn't very pleasing, to say the least. But the body double thing didn't bug me at all. I somehow knew you were going to be like, that goddamn body double.
I'm fine with the concept of a body double, and it makes sense. But it's literally just the execution of how they handle the body doubles that confuse me. But when it actually, like, the concept of it being a thing, I'm on board. That makes
sense, yeah.
Perfect sense. And then
especially if you're in danger, yeah.
Yeah, and then they just make it weird. They just make it weird. Like, do all the body doubles just have, like, voice modulators that sound like Padme? Is that just a thing?
Well, that would make sense in a Star Wars universe, yeah.
But then I
could see something like that.
Do they need to establish that, or is that just a thing? Or again, is it just for the audience? And I think at the end of the day,
it's more or less just for the audience.
It's just for the audience, and like,
just to try and trick you.
I get that, but at the same time, it just bugs me because it's like, no, don't. Your audience isn't that dumb. But like at the same time, yes, we are. We are really dumb.
Well, when the movie came out, to be fair, we were 11, so we were that dumb. Oh. I remember being legitimately concerned for a whole 10 seconds, and I saw R2. I was like, oh, never mind.
Oh, yeah.
And that was at 11, so...
If R2's there, we know everything's okay.
Well, man, okay, so some chick's just flying with R2? Okay, that's obviously Padme, man. Like, obviously.
But why is R2 with Padme? Because didn't he belong to Obi-Wan at some point? I guess not. And then he's suddenly with Anakin and no one questions that? Like, in Episode 3, R2 and Anakin are super tight after she's been with Padme for arguably probably the last 10 years. It's like, wait, is something going on between these two, maybe?
Because yeah, no one put the dots together?
No,
you gave him the droid? Okay. Cool.
It's cool. All right.
That's because he gifted her 3PO now. So she has 3PO. She doesn't need R2.
But again, no, like they just droid swap? Like, is that just the thing that happens that no one bats an eye at? Like, it was...
Probably. Honestly, they probably don't. I bet people droid swap all the time.
Well, I mean, like, let's be honest. Like this is...
I don't know.
Honestly, in the Star Wars universe, there is a lot of racism towards droids. Like, massively. Like, there's so much so there's been books and comics written on it, where, like, the droids uprise in order to, like, actually fight the way they're treated. I think that was even a small plot point in Solo. With, like, Lando's droid was, like, all about, like, droid rights and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like, that's the thing. That wasn't just, like, a random thing they added in. Like, that's been in deep lore since the original trilogy, where droids are, like, technically sentient beings. They are very aware that they exist, but their minds are erased. They get blown up, torn apart. They get treated so poorly.
That's true.
Like, it's ridiculous, and it's something that, like, I want to see explained or explored at some point. I think it'd be fun, but at the same time, it's just like, it's such a weird concept, but I love it. To go back to the CG though, the moment that I noticed the CG pretty quick, but the moment, like, it slapped me in the face super hard, being like, look, terrible CG, was actually in Palpatine's office. Because if you look at all, like, the walls and stuff like that, like, everything, there's his furniture, I guess, is practical, maybe. But everything else is just, like, CG'd. And it's just, like, and you can tell it's just poorly painted walls with computers. And it's, like, it's not good. Yeah. But Yoda looks great. Is that where all the CG budget went into? Was, like, it's like, well...
I think so.
Well, guys, we can have a good-looking Yoda, or we can have good-looking sets.
Yeah, well, I of course you'd spend the money on Yoda, right? Like, it's freaking Yoda, man. You can't make a bad Yoda.
100%.
I thought the CG in the Yoda at the very beginning of the film wasn't, like, it was okay, like, just his movement and walking and stuff.
His face did a weird thing.
Mainly when they had like, that shot of Mace Windu sitting there and Yoda was walking towards where Padme was coming in. It was kind of like, it was kind of weird there. But other than that, though, like obviously the Yoda CGI model was considerably, at least consistently well done throughout the movie. Especially considering they had to put him into a fight scene later, right? So
Yeah.
it makes sense that a lot of the effort went to Yoda.
No, that's I'm glad they did though. Like the character CG, honestly, even looking at the Kaminoans, looking at Zam Wessel, looking at a lot of the CG characters, they were handled well. But the CG environments were not. And that's
We're pretty poor.
And that's a problem, especially when you go back and look at Star Wars and how rich their sets were. Like you could have built some sets, man. Like you should have built some sets.
Well, yeah, and thankfully we moved away from like a good chunk of that once they left Coruscant. Like until you get again closer to Geonosis and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
I guess Camino. Never mind. I guess Camino had a ton of CGI. Never mind. That was a poor take or observation.
That's only 2 planets. Whereas like when you get to Tatooine and Naboo, they were back on sets.
Exactly, and I think honestly, when you look at it too, Coruscant is just the most glaring of the bad CGI sets. Like all the sets in Coruscant are bad. The Jedi Temple is bad. The Jedi Temple Tower, where all the guys hang out, was bad. Like Palpatine's office was bad. Like so, most of the sets, I think that we're thinking the bad CGI. I think a lot of that was in Coruscant. The other places that used CGI, it wasn't really that terrible. Like. You know, like it's not to the quality and level we expect today. Like if you put Camino out to the quality it was back then, you're like brand new movie today, and you put the same CGI quality as Camino, we'd all be like, the hell is this?
What are you doing?
Because it was okay for its time, right? But like nowadays, it would not even get close to the proper standard. People would be upset. But yeah, no, Coruscant was just visibly bad. A lot of their sets were in Coruscant. Visibly just not good.
What's your next point, Matt? I want to hear what's. I have more thoughts. I can keep going if you want.
Oh, we can keep going forever, man. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'll jump over to one of my points, man. Oh man, this movie gets awkward as F right off the bat. Like it does not waste any time making you feel incredibly uncomfortable. Anakin shows up and it's super awkward. Like,
dude,
right away, man.
But so like
right away.
Before that, like, because that's honestly same kind of note with me, but before that too, and it ties into this, there's a line in the movie where like they're talking about who can we get to protect Padme, and they're like, hey, an old friend of yours, Obi-Wan Kenobi, could totally do this. Like, does an old friend just mean someone that you went on kind of an adventure with and had zero contact with in episode 1? And then
over the last 10 years?
And then do the exact same thing in this movie where you have, like, zero interaction with her? Like...
More or less.
Like, they're built up... I was, like, just thinking about that, even when they said the line, and, like, even the way she reacts and everyone is about it. They're like, oh, yes, an old friend. And I'm like, wait. They don't ever, in this entire franchise, act like old friends. The closest they do is in episode 3 when he's like asking about where Anakin is. That's the closest they get to being old friends, but even then it's just like there's a disconnect. There isn't a believable real relationship there.
I think they use the term pretty loosely, like in general. I don't think it's meant to be like, oh wow, we're good old pals. I think it's just someone you have a past experience with and you have trust. Because Obi-Wan was there with Qui-Gon through all that shit, right? Like, and whether they interacted a ton or not, like, he was there. He was present. He fought for her city. He fought for her planet. His master died, and he ultimately killed Darth Maul at the end of the day, right? Like, he's the one, well, I guess didn't technically kill him as we know now, but he's the one who defeated Darth Maul. And stood with them at the end. So I think it's not necessarily a matter of relationship and friendship on a personal level, but just as instead of some other random Jedi, here's a Jedi you trust and you already have experience with, who has already fought for you and protected you before. I think that's kind of more the idea there.
I think you're
not
right.
necessarily like a practical friend.
I think you're right with that, but it's the way that everyone reacted about it. Everyone reacted like, it's like, oh yes, you have a meaningful relationship with this man. And it's like, no, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. And like, that being said,
let's be honest, if she did, she'd totally be banging Obi-Wan, not Anakin, man.
I mean, like, it
Papa
makes the
Wan
most
Kenobi over
sense,
there.
but But, like, dude, going back to your note, though, like, Anakin's creepy as hell in this movie, isn't he?
Like, just right off the bat, too. Like, immediately, he shows up there, and it's like, oh my god.
Even, like, it was kind of funny in the elevator where he's, like, kind of sweating and kind of nervous.
Like,
and
getting
stuff,
a little nervous.
Because it's like a high school...
I haven't seen her for 10 years, master.
I haven't seen her for 10 years. It's like a high school... It's a high school crush thing. It's a whole, like, you know, oh my gosh, like, this is someone who I've had a thing for all these years, and she probably never thought about me that way. But this is nervous, because what if she does... And then she does, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And, like, I have several points throughout my notes being like, woof. Woof. Ah! What are you doing?
Oh my god, no. Like, I haven't seen it for 10 years. And, like, yeah, the elevator, you're, like, kind of cute. But then they show up, and she greets Obi-Wan, and then she's like, Anakin? Like, oh, wow, you've grown up. And he's like... So have you
grown more beautiful, that
I mean.
is.
And then you're like, oh my god.
And the eyes he's
and
giving
like
her.
His looks, the eyes, that's
like,
where it is,
just
man.
Like, and it's
the
because
eyes.
it's a lot of like
eyes.
Him tilting his head down and looking up at her. Which immediately that's not a sexy look, that's a I'm gonna stalk you. I'm gonna stalk you until you just give in.
That is that is a problematic look. If you've ever seen the show You on Netflix, is that what it is? That's a look. That's the kind of look he would give people. Like that's the vibes Anakin be giving off, man.
Dude,
and I watched the first 2 seasons. Actually, I guess there's only 2. The third one's probably coming. It's actually a pretty good show. Way better than I thought it would be. Way more interesting.
Better than Star Wars Episode 2.
But anyway, this isn't about you. This is about Anakin. But Anakin's got crazy you vibes going on.
Crazy me vibes going on. You saying that I'm like Anakin Skywalker?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
and I just mean, like, not only is it creepy, but it's just such... like, this is the first time we're being introduced to Anakin Skywalker as an adult. Not a 9-year-old, but, like, as an older individual, right? Like, more in the lines with the Luke and, like, that kind of age. So this is the first time we're getting introduced to Anakin Skywalker proper, and the character immediately doesn't have any chance of hell of connecting with the audience. He immediately walks into the room and face plants immediately. There's no opportunity even there for the audience to bond with this character, to connect with him, to empathize with him, to feel what he's feeling, because he's so goddamn creepy. And it's right off the start. He's creepy, he's whiny, he's annoying. He just argues with Obi-Wan all the time, like, oh no, the protection is for local guard, not the Jedi. You know, investigation is implied in this matter. And then Obi-Wan's got to shut his ass down. But it's so, like, it's awkward. But that's no way to connect with a character when you're bringing in a character.
Arguably, as a 19-year-old, though, as someone who is 19, he's believable. Because that's how a lot of 19-year-old who... Well, like, that's where I'm torn on this. Would he have social skills or not? Like, because he's essentially been indoctrinated into this cult at a young age. But, like, there are other kids there, so there's obviously social interaction.
Yeah, and they're a very social group. And they have to go and deal with different people all the time.
Well, and do diplomatic...
It's not like they're hermits. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like...
And they have to be diplomatically tactful.
So,
like,
would you...
Did he walk around to every planet they went to and got in arguments with Obi-Wan? Like, that would be uncomfortable for everyone.
Well, I guess that's the question... Especially when they're already talking about him doing the trials and stuff like that. Or he thinks he's ready for the trials. But, like... The thing that just... That's a good question, though. Is because of the type of setting that he grew up in now, would he technically be more mature than a regular 19-year-old?
I would argue, yes. I would argue the Jedi, like, I think they have how they were brought up, how they're raised, and their responsibility. I think they have to be more responsible than your average 19-year-old or more mature. It's kind of like the same idea with Spider-Man, right? Like, he was a youngin' when he got his powers.
Yeah.
Like, again, if you're watching the films, you're like, oh, he was done high school or almost done high school. But in reality, like, usually it happened earlier, like, you know, grade 10 or roughly, give or take.
Yeah, in the comics, it's around, he's 15 or 16 in the comics, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's roughly around, like, grade 9, grade 10 thing. So he is that immature teenager. But by the time he's 19, he's going to be more mature than your average teenager because he has the powers, because he has to be responsible, because of all those different elements. So I feel like it's the same thing kind of for Jedi.
Spider-Verse kind of actually did that really well, where they showed like the different levels of like, and it was cool seeing it between like Miles, who like just got his powers as a teenager, versus Peter, who's like been Spider-Man for anywhere from like 5 to 8 years. Even like the Spider-Man PS4 game handled that really well, where there was a maturity. Yeah, he still had his problems, but there was still a maturity about how he handled himself. And I think that's kind of where, to me, they missed the mark with Anakin, is they could have given him a bit more. Like, honestly, growing up, I always thought Anakin was more of like almost a Han Solo type figure, where he's like, he's a rogue, but he's like still like, he's got some charm. The way Anakin was handled in this was like almost every single incel's like ideal self. It's the whole like, oh yes, if I just say these right words, then a woman will love me no matter what. She could be telling me that no, she's not interested, but if I just keep pressing, she'll say yes. And that's such a problematic behavior.
Yeah.
Like, am I saying that
is.
Star Wars Episode 2 is single-handedly responsible for incel culture? Maybe. I need to study this some more. But like,
I'm not certain.
But it's problematic. It's 100% problematic. And the thing is, what's more problematic is at the end of the day, it worked. At the end of the day, it worked out. And even the way that it worked out, where suddenly, like,
all of a sudden she is interested.
Suddenly she's like they're about to die, and she's like, I love you. And it's like, okay, you spent...
Well, even he's shocked. He's like, shit, that worked?
All right, I guess all I had to do was put us in a life-threatening situation, although he didn't. He didn't have to... That's the other thing that bugs me with it, though, is he didn't actually have to do anything. When he's... but maybe that's not a bad message, because when he stopped trying, that's when it technically worked. But at the same time, he stopped trying as in, like, he literally gave up, because it got to a point where, like, basically... I have this further down in my notes where he's all like, oh man, I need to go to Tatooine to save my mom. And then, he fails at that. And then Padme's like, well, we need to go to Geonosian to save Obi-Wan. And he's like, nah, can't do that. He's like my father, but I can't. He told me not to. And it's like, this is the one time you're going to listen to Obi-Wan when he's like in danger. Like,
the one time you listen to the Jedi? Yeah.
Like, it's...
But I think, like that whole aspect is definitely problematic from, like, his character standpoint. But again, just how his character portrayed is problematic just from a film goer standpoint. Because you're supposed to be able to connect with characters and at least empathize with them. Maybe you don't have to relate to them, be like, oh yeah, I see myself in Anakin. Because I honestly don't know many people who see themselves in Anakin. Like,
no.
Like, no one in general is that creepy. And if someone told me, yeah, I relate most to Anakin Skywalker in episode 2, I'd be like, you a creep. You know what I mean? Like, that's a red flag. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's definitely a red flag. But it's problematic just from a, like, understanding and relating and connecting with the character, because we have to connect with him for his fall to becoming Darth Vader and everything he goes through. We need to be able to empathize and care about this character. But immediately he walks in, face plants, acts like a dink, and it's like, okay, well now how are we supposed to connect with this guy? Because now I'm annoyed by this guy. I'm irritated by this guy. And I think he's super freaking creepy. Like, how am I supposed to connect with him? How?
I love that Obi-Wan's whole thing with Anakin too, in that thing is like, hey, not chill out, man, you're being a creep. He's like, you need to stay away from politicians. You need to stay away from Padme because she's a politician.
Yeah.
And that's their core conversation. It's not like, dude, you need to, like... He's like, you need to calm down and do better, but you also need to stay away from politicians. Like, Obi-Wan hates two things, and that's politicians and droids. That's what Obi-Wan hates. And it's just...
And flying.
It's just such a weird conversation. Like, it was funny, and kind of, like, sets up that he's a bit skeptical of even the Chancellor, but, like, at the same time, it's just so... It doesn't make sense. Why would he agree to this political detail if he doesn't like politicians?
Well, I don't think honestly as Jedi you get much of a choice. Like, go watch this thing. Fuck no, I'm not doing that shit. I don't know. I would assume it's just a task. You're there to serve and to serve and do your part, right? So I honestly don't know if they have an overall choice or not. And
unless you're
because it's
Anakin,
Padme,
then
he probably would go. Like just out of memories and respect
out of
for his
history.
master and everything they went through because of history, he would go, and I'm sure he would do it. I think the disconnect between that conversation and what actually went down just before that, honestly, I think that comes down to the execution and the acting. Because I don't think it was written in there for Anakin to be super creepy. Like, I think that's just how Hayden Christensen played it. So unless it's, like, if it was written to be creepy, clearly you'd have to write something afterwards. Obi-Wan would be like, yo, don't be a creep. But if your acting is just creepy, then and you're still following the script, then it's like, well, yeah, then it kind of comes across as a disconnect. The execution isn't great. It's not great.
The question I have is it just Hayden Christensen's fault? Or is that also George Lucas directing him to be more creepy?
No, and that's exactly it. We don't know. Like, Christensen decided to play it a certain way, and if George Lucas, and ultimately at the end of the day, clearly George Lucas was okay with it. At the end of the day, like, the buck stops with him. If he would have said, dude, that's creepy, stop doing that shit, then we would never have seen it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he was okay with it. And he was okay with it to the point that he also put it in throughout the whole rest of the movie. So it's not necessarily his fault as an actor. Like, he did portray it that way, but also the director was A-okay with it. So you can't blame Hayden Christensen all the time. Like, again, the guy, he's a nice enough good guy, Canadian dude, like the strongest actor. He is not.
I think he got a raw deal because I think he could become a good. I think he could be a good actor, and maybe we'll see that when he gets older. Like,
well, I've seen him in other things, and he hasn't really been great. I haven't seen him for a long time, granted, but even shortly after episode 3, he was in a couple things, and he wasn't great.
But again, I think and maybe it's a Robert Pattinson kind of thing, where it's the fact that he keeps being in these big CG spectacle things. Maybe he's a really good, like, just dramatic actor, just in a smaller role that we never seen him in. Right? Yeah. I'm curious about that. I'm very curious.
Well, if he ever comes back, I guess we'll find out.
I'll give him a fair shake.
Oh yeah, like I have nothing against the guy. He's definitely just isn't his strongest performance at the end of the day.
Yep. I mean, but even if you look at his performance between episode 2 and episode 3,
it's considerably different.
I'm curious. I'm curious to get to revisit episode 3 because I feel like his acting was definitely a lot better. But it's also possibly the dialogue was better.
Well, the character of Anakin Skywalker was considerably better by 3. If they would have taken more of the elements from the Anakin in 3 and put it in 2, I think 2 would have been pulled off just better. Like, he just came across way too whiny, too immature.
If you mixed
and just annoying.
If you mixed elements of 2 and 1 together to make a really good episode 1, I think that would have worked. Aged up Anakin, like we said last time, and even had like just Darth Maul be a through-line villain, and you had that stuff be more of episode 1, then I think episode 2 and 3 could have been really good. Like, it could have been, and unfortunately 3 is kind of where it became good. How'd you feel about the bugs? Or do you have other thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's enough on that thought for now. We'll come back to it plenty of times, I'm sure, as we go through the episode, because it's littered throughout just how creepy this guy is.
Oh, but I know.
Anyway, no, I just said Anakin's got saber skills, man. Like, I find it incredibly impressive. He whipped out his lightsaber in the pitch black dark and killed 2 little bugs that were right by her face and didn't chop her head off. I thought that was impressive.
Well, like, in all honesty, I love the concept of those bugs for assassins. Like, I really like, literally from that moment to, like, Zam getting killed is one of the best scenes in the prequels. Everything from, like, as soon as those bugs are getting, like, ignoring the conversation with Obi-Wan and Anakin, but, like, the bugs getting injected. R2's kind of useless in that, but, like, also in his defense, they weren't really expecting bugs to be used. But, like...
yeah, that's not what they were looking for.
But those were creepy crawlies, and it's actually one of my favorite... That's one of the things I learned about Foley, was around those bugs. Because to get the sound, they just cut a grapefruit in half and, like, squish the grapefruit.
Oh, nice.
And that's how you got that, like, really weird, like, squishing, scattering sound, which is really dope. Like, and I really like that, and Anakin's lightsaber skills are bananas there. Although the editing in that shot doesn't work. Because when Anakin jumps up onto her bed, he's, like, on top of her. And then she sits up. They cut to a shot of her, like, here, and she sits up like he's just way back here. Like, there's nothing at all. And it just, like, it always, for years, has bugged me. I'm like, that I think like as a kid,
I also
used to
feel like I also feel like just mentioning her sitting up, I felt like that was too slow of a reaction for someone whipping a lightsaber around your head. Like,
one at the same time
what?
though, you'd want to have a slow reaction because if you sit up and the lightsaber's
away.
like right by your face, it's like, well, I guess Luke and
I
Leia
killed
never got
myself. God damn it.
But like,
True,
but no,
true.
and then as soon as Obi-Wan jumps out that window, which I love because that's such an Obi-Wan. Like, actually, no, that's
He's
like
got balls, man.
That's
He's
the
got balls.
That's the least Obi-Wan thing that he does in the whole movie. That's more of an Anakin thing, but it works because it's Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And it's just like but I love that. I love the banter between him and Anakin. I like, again, the CG's not great, but at the same time, it's product of its time.
It wasn't terrible.
The chase has good energy to it.
Yeah.
Even when they crash and they end up in the bar, that has some of the best moments too, where it's just like the death stick scene.
Oh, that's great.
Like,
yeah.
Like, and then the bit of the mystery, like when they finally catch her, and then it's like, hey, who hired you? And just like that sequence is one of the best in Star Wars, like at least in the prequels. I personally think it's super strong, and there needed to be more of that. If the movie was that, it would have been better. If the movie was more interaction between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and like actually working together to solve this case, it would have been better. But again, it's the problem of you got to split up your team. You got to split them up. It's to me, that's one of the biggest problems with this film too, is like, yeah, you get the first act with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and then the third act with Obi-Wan and Anakin, but there's just like the longest part of this movie just didn't have them, all for the sake of setting up a romance that was creepy.
Yeah. More or less. No, I agree with you, man. This set piece was really good. And I think, like, in my personal opinion, through most of the movie, the majority of the set pieces are really good. Like, it does have very entertaining action when it has it. The romance stuff, absolutely, horrifyingly painful. But I mean, the set pieces are great. This speeder chase through Coruscant was great. The starfighter fight in the asteroids between Jango Fett and Obi-Wan, that's great. The gladiator pit, great. You know, the droid factory wasn't my favorite, but it had a lot of cool elements in it. And of course, like the big clone battle at the end was great. So like the set pieces are good. The problem is the whole rest of the movie. Like that's literally the weakest part. But no, I agree. This is a great set piece. And the CGI didn't bug me that much. And the nice thing is it's nighttime. So that's going to hide a lot of your bad CG, right? So that was a really smart move to do it at night.
The opening shot's daytime.
Yeah.
And that could even be why, like, it just didn't land, right? Because it wasn't lit nice. And like, it's
lighting makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
Again, with Jurassic Park, why it works so well is because it was shot at night and rain and all that kind of stuff, and that hides a lot.
Yeah.
But oh man, like even just some of the moments, like I love the idea of like Anakin just like tuning Obi-Wan out during that chase, and then just like
ignoring him, yeah,
yep,
and jumping out.
Yep. See you.
I'm really sorry.
and then Obi-Wan's reaction of like, I hate it when he does that. This isn't the first time that Anakin's done that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Obi-Wan, I think you need to remind your Padawan to like wear a seatbelt. I think that's a problem.
That seems to be the issue.
Or if Anakin's willing to like risk life and limb by throwing himself off of anything, maybe you should also look at your teaching structure, because like
yeah.
Like if that's how
what are you teaching this kid?
If that's how your students are reacting, you probably should reevaluate how you're going about this whole thing.
What you're doing, yeah.
But even like, dude, like I just everything about that sequence I love. Even like Obi-Wan's free fall when Zam shoots the thing out from his hands. Even when Anakin gets on top of her speeder and like is trying to like get her with the lightsaber,
break in,
and then sees that she changes shape. Like I love that all the time. Like it's like, man, like the only parts I get a little weirded out is like the reaction of like the passerbys, where it's like the what the, and then like the random Doug, the random like essentially it's Sebulba, but it's not, just being like Jedi poodoo, like okay, that's the weirdest part. But otherwise, like, dude, it's so fun. Like that speeder chase is pod racing for episode 1 for me. That's like, I can, like, if I had to only pick one moment to watch from all of episode 1, it would be pod racing. If I had to pick a moment of all of episode 2 to watch, it would be the speeder chase.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how much I love that, and that's where it's like, it's as much as I disliked the movie, that was a sequence that, like, I slowed down to regular speed to watch.
Yeah, and it is one of those things too where you could have done it really quite well without CGI, right? Like, CGI does have its benefits, but you know, it's just using them in balance. Like we talked about last time we talked about episode 1, right? It's the balance between practical and CGI. Like, and when they go way too much in the CGI, you notice it, and especially in areas where it's like, you don't need CGI to build a room. Like, just build a set, man. Like, I get building a set takes more effort, arguably. Maybe not. I don't know. I guess CGI work probably take a while too. I don't know. But the fact is, like, when you're using CGI to do things you should easily do practically, then, like, it just stands out, especially at that time of CGI.
Well, I feel like the speeder chase, they could have used a lot more CG, or a lot more practical, just with the speeders and how they went. Like, I think you could have done a bit more of a mix. Also, the sound design. The sound design of the speeders. I love the sound design of this whole scene.
Oh, I was gonna say that's like the one thing that annoys me. Anakin's and Obi-Wan's was fine. Dude,
the guitar sound. I love it. I love it so much.
Dude, that's the only thing. I like the sequence.
Well, 'cause
I hate the like. It's
I
so
think that's actually
annoying
part of
to
the
me.
score, though. Like, I think that's actually part of the score that ties in with it. Like, it's a really cool thing.
I've never actually listened. Yeah, maybe.
I think so. I need to go back and listen to that track again, but I want to say I remember hearing electric guitar and being like, hey, they use electric. That's kind of dope. That's kind of awesome. Like, man, like, no, I love it. Again, like, that whole sequence, I just love.
I like the idea of it. I don't like the execution. Yeah, that's the only thing that I dislike about it. But, like, it's still watchable. Like, I wouldn't turn it off. Like, oh, F the speeder noise. You know what I mean? But
even the music in that scene, though, is really good, too. Like, because it's
like, great. That's where you get that high, fast... Yeah, you get all those drums beat.
Also, it took me years to realize the thing that they fly through, like that purple lightning stuff, is essentially the same thing that, like, powers the lightsaber. Or lightsaber, the pod racers.
Pod racer, yeah.
It's the same thing, and that's, like, I love that. And again, that's another thing too, where it establishes a bit of their relationship, where it's like, Anakin, how many times have I told you? And then they're just getting electrocuted. Don't fly through this.
Power couplings. Like,
that was short.
Yeah, that was great.
I love it.
That was great. He should, in all honesty, Anakin easily could have flown over it, but I mean, whatever, it's fine. Like, but also, it's cool.
Also, Matt, this whole scene gives you one of your favorite memes that you keep sending me.
Oh yeah,
Obi-Wan just having the time of his life.
On his cruiser, just having a fun time. Yeah, I keep saying this one. Maybe you guys seen it on Facebook. Was it? Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. Ain't nothing gonna slow me down. Uh-oh. And then he, like, looks down out of the speeder, like, he's all happy. And then there's, like, Anakin from episode 3, like, all burning, like, crawling up the side. He comes back up and then he's like, F it, just keep rolling. Just keep on rolling. I love that meme. It makes me laugh. I think it's the song, too. But, like, just the idea of it just makes me bust a gut. But yeah, no, that's a great set piece. And they even foreshadow even the fight with Yoda, right? They mention his lightsaber skills. Like, if you practiced your saber skills as much as you're piloting, you'd be on par with Master Yoda, right? Like,
I thought I already was.
Yeah, and that puts that idea in your mind, like, oh, Yoda's a lightsaber fighter. I wonder what that would look like. And then, of course, when you get to the end, that pays off too, right? So that was a nice little piece. It looks like something foreshadowing there. Yeah, exactly. It looks like a little frog going nuts. Going nuts.
And then, again, like, foreshadowing as well with the whole, like, I feel like you're going to be the death of me. Like,
oh, yeah. Like, I got another point on that, I think, little later on that I'll bring that up. But, yeah, there was, that's, to me, no, I'll save it for later, because there's some more points I think I got to go on with that. One thing I pointed out, though, that I've always noticed, and I'm curious if you've noticed this or any of you have noticed this. I put on the notes here, Fakey 1 Kenobi, Because when Anakin's about to run to the bar and Obi-Wan stops him and he gives him the lightsaber speech, right? Like, this lightsaber is your life. I'm like, I don't feel like that's Ewan McGregor. I don't feel like that's Ewan McGregor. I think it's a very convincing double, but I don't think that's Ewan McGregor. Like, just the way he delivers his lines, his cadence, his voice, it's not the same. Like, even look at the face. It's a little weird. The eyes look green, but although that could be just because the lighting around them. But it's a decent impression. But if you look at the beard as well, it looks literally glued on. Like, it looks like they glued on the beard. And then the next shot, when they start walking in and he says, why do I feel like you're going to be the death of me? You can clearly tell there's a distinct difference between the person who is talking outside the bar to inside the bar. And it doesn't seem to me like it's because Obi-Wan has scolded Anakin already in this movie and he scolds him later on a couple times. Like, it doesn't seem to me this is the same actor. Like, it feels like we need to do reshoots. Ewan McGregor was busy. We got Steve. You know what I mean? Like, make him look like Obi-Wan.
So there's a couple different theories that I could have with this, and I need to go back and rewatch it because I've never noticed that.
Yeah.
But one could be reshoots, and it could have actually been they had to, if Ewan McGregor shaved his beard, it could be that they had to glue one back on him, right? Because it would say that he moved to a different film and had to shave.
It could be, yeah.
Voiceover is tricky because this movie was ADR. 100% this movie was ADR beginning to finish. So whether it was Ewan McGregor just performed it weird and then they just kept it in, or something else I learned about, apparently there are sound-alikes that get brought in for ADR as well sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I think there are some celebrities who never do their own ADR. Ever. They don't do their own ADR, they just let a voice sound-alike come in and dub their voices over. And it's the weirdest concept I've ever heard, but at the same time, like, that's kind of cool, but, like, at the same time, it's kind of lame, because just come in and do your job.
Like, just do your thing, man.
But like you said, if he was unavailable, though, but if Ewan McGregor was busy.
Like, because it's not just, like, the audio, though. Like, it's just physically, it doesn't quite look like him. Like, it's very close. It could be a stunt double.
That could also be a camera angle thing, though.
It's very, very close. It could be. You'd have to go and watch it. You have to go back and watch it, because it just feels like there's such a distinct difference between, like, that scene, and then immediately when he walks into the when he walks into the bar, like, it's such, like, it just feels so jarring. And I've always felt like, this isn't Ewan McGregor. Like,
it's still in my player, man. I can throw it on and check it right now.
Well, you don't have to do it right now.
I could do it.
I'm just saying.
But like, you could do it. It could even just be the lens they picked might have changed, because that's what lenses do, is they change your face shape, right? So if you shoot someone with like 50mm lens versus like an 85, your face is gonna look different. Like, I've seen it on me all the time, and it bugs me because it's like, I mean, like, I still look hideous no matter what, but like, it's still.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks. I mean, thanks for agreeing. I thought you were gonna compliment me, and my fishing for compliment
all the time.
Well,
listen, bro. Listen.
Try to throw this one back.
You know how I be. I just always I'm honest, man. I'm honest.
And Ethan, you as ugly as a rock.
Well, I was just agreeing with the camera, lens and the different look, and maybe that's one thing too. But I'm just interested, and I only bring it up not to like say like it's a fake. I'm not making a clear statement. I'm just saying I'm perceiving this as not real. Like, to me, it screams all sorts of illegitimate, not actual Ewan McGregor. So I really said that weird. Ewan McGregor. So by all take, I'm just saying, Ethan, y'all listening, go check out that one scene, just that one part, and tell me it's not like just, it's weird, man. It's weird. And I noticed it a long time ago, and now I can't not notice it. Every time I watch, I notice it. Every time I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So here's a conspiracy theory for you. An episode 2 conspiracy theory, yeah. So I don't know, just go check it out. See what you think. Maybe you can explain it. But like, to me, like, and maybe now that I point it out, you'll see it and you'll be like, what? You're like, dude, that's weird. Maybe you'll be like, oh no, it's totally this. But I would just be curious if you can find me an answer.
I'll check it out. I could check it out now, but I'll check it out later. I'll see what happens.
Oh yeah, no, don't stop the podcast.
I'll tell you how wrong you are.
I would appreciate that. But then I'm still gonna see it and I'm like, nah, he's full of shit. I won't believe you. I've made up my mind. But no, that was a great set piece.
Oh, it's so good. And again, like it makes the movie for me. I mean, it's between that and the arena scene. Those two are just like the strongest points, and like everything else in between is like okay.
Different levels of that variation, yeah. The bar scene is like, it feels like a very New Hope-y, eh? Like it kind of has that New Hope vibe to it. Like not necessarily the aesthetics, but just how it kind of all plays out with like Obi-Wan, the gun, whipping out his lightsaber real quick, cutting off an arm. I'm like, oh, this is
I never even thought
so
about that parallel.
Like, yeah, no, it, like, not on, yeah, the funny thing I have about this movie, and I'll mention it a little later, but it kind of feels like this is the one movie in the prequels where they're like, here's the younger version of everything. And they just kind of reference so many, like, old trilogy things in this film. Like, again, with, why do I feel like you're going to be the death of me? And then going into that bar and just how he's waiting and, like, just how the gun is pointed. Like, it all just feels very... like New Hope, not like aesthetically, but just in certain aspects of it.
I really like that though, because unlike like as much as I love the sequels and stuff like that, anytime that they put a cantina scene in the sequels, they're trying so hard to recapture that episode 4 energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like even episode 7, 8, and 9 all had their own cantina scenes. Even I think Rogue One did, and all of them are trying to like. I'm pretty sure it did. I'm pretty sure it had like some kind of scene like that. I need to rewatch it, but like
I don't think it did.
But
I get what you're saying.
They all have the same energy where it's like, oh, we got to cut between all these creatures. We got to see all these things. But episode 2 has a cantina scene, but doesn't do that. It doesn't draw. It tells the story. It focuses on telling the story the best it can, and that's Obi-Wan and Anakin looking for somebody. Anakin's looking for Zam, and Obi-Wan's looking at her for his own way, where he's just like,
the bait,
chilling at the bar and hanging out. But he knows that. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And like that's what I like is like while it is reminiscent, it has such its own energy. But I think that's the strength of the prequels is that it does have its own energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you, years ago, just, like, if I had no context of Star Wars, and you showed me the prequel trilogy, and then the Star Wars, and, like, you showed me the prequel trilogy, and then you showed me A New Hope, and told me that they're not related in the slightest, I might kind of believe you if it wasn't for all the character crossover.
Yeah.
Because they're so tonally not the same.
Mm-hmm.
But that works, though. That works for it. And I think that's one of the strengths, is that it isn't tonally just retreading the same ground.
Yeah. Well, moving on from that point.
I'm like, Matt, do you got more to say? What's your next point? Because I have several points. I have so many points. Man.
Well, what's your next one? I think I did. No, wait, you did this one. Did I do this one? You did it. Okay. Anyway.
I think I did, but like.
Okay, no, you go ahead.
How far ahead are you jumping? I'm curious.
Palpatine and Anakin.
No, that's my next note too.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Matt, you're my favorite. I like you. You're good people.
You're good people. I get you, man. I get you. No, I just had a point here. We sit like this movie does not invest a lot of time in the relationship between Palpatine and Anakin, but it establishes it in one scene. Like it just shows you like clearly Palpatine has an incredible amount of influence over this young Jedi. Just in the few lines that they share back and forth.
But to me, we needed more of that. We needed more with Anakin and Palpatine. And it also raises a bigger question. Anakin has managed to have a really, really good relationship with Palpatine, but hasn't seen Padme for 10 years.
And she's a senator.
And so she'd be around. It's not like she was like just on Naboo. Like, she's on Coruscant quite a bit representing her people and would obviously have met with the Chancellor. And you're telling me that in 10 years they've never ran into each other?
Exactly.
Like, even like going back to Saskatoon, I've ran into like people from school. Like, there was one day where I went back to Saskatoon and I was leaving Midtown Plaza and who was walking in but Nicole. We didn't even know both of us was in the city. and we just ran into each other. It was like, oh my goodness, what are you doing here? This is crazy.
Yeah.
So if that can happen to me, I'm pretty sure if you're going to be in the same buildings for 10 years, it's going to happen as well. I'm pretty sure that's that to me, that's where it's either you needed to establish they've seen each other on and off throughout the 10 years, especially if you're trying to set up the fact that Anakin and Palpatine have this weird mentor relationship. Also, why are the Jedi letting him hang out with why? Like, what? How does that work?
I mean, I'm assuming there's certain times where Jedi, you just get free time. Like, you're on free time, man. Like, sweet, I'm gonna go hang out with Palpatine. Like,
but like, no one's like, that's
weird.
Kind of weird.
Yeah, like, I'm not hanging out with Jedi. I'm gonna go hang out with this old man who runs the Senate. Like, I love politicians. It is a strange thing, and I think even too, if you would establish that Anakin and Padme, again going back to that point, have come across each other from time to time over the last 10 years, it would make the relationship way more believable than, I haven't seen you since you were 9. Oh my god, I love you. Like, it makes, like, that's where, to me, that would make way more sense and be way more realistic. And it would actually be interesting when they have to protect her, that instead of him being, like, clearly right in front of Obi-Wan, being a huge creeper, like, not even hiding it, they actually had to hide their relationship in front of Obi-Wan. Like, that would have been a different level of tension, right? Because they have seen each other. They are interested, but they're trying to kind of play that low key. That would have been way more interesting than Creeper McGee.
If there was more mutual flirting, I think that would have been a big plus too, but there really wasn't. And like, again, put their relationship in context. And it frustrates me and confuses me because by the end of this movie, they're married.
Yeah.
That they've spent a whole of maybe 3 days. This is a weekend together after not seeing each other for 10 years and then getting married. That is me moving back to Saskatoon, hanging out with someone from our graduating class for a weekend, and then being like,
getting
let's
married
get
by
hitched.
the end of Sunday.
Like,
and not even let's get hitched. Let's literally get married by the end of Sunday. Like,
yeah,
or
like that was
the
like
Monday.
Like, that's the timeline. And like, I was talking to my roommate about it, and he's like, oh, well, it takes time for him to get a prosthetic arm, so it probably took a while. I'm like, it takes no time. Luke got a human-looking replica one 20 years later. The same afternoon, he got his arm cut off. Like, I'm assuming in the Star Wars universe, it's just like, oh man, here, new arm.
It's got a couple kicking around, yeah.
Exactly, and it's like, is that how they got away with it too? Is like Anakin went to Naboo for treatment? Really? Like, I guess, but also like I feel like they'd have better facilities on Coruscant.
Well, I think, in the film too, they just mentioned that he was just escorting the senator home, right? Like,
did they say that?
Yeah.
That's I checked out apparently. But again, it's like, but
it's still not a good reason.
It's not a good reason. It's like, and it's just, and no one, the Jedi can see the future, but no one saw that. We could see it from miles away.
Yeah. Like, yeah, they weren't very good at detecting things they could see with their own eyes, let alone the Force, especially at that time. But I mean, I don't know, like, even between Palpatine and Anakin, for this film, for this story, I didn't really need more. I was really okay with what they give. Like, again, if we're talking about a different world where, you know, the episodes are spaced out in time differently, and they're hitting on different points in time differently, then, yeah, I would say, you know, we need more Anakin, we need more Palpatine. But that relationship only really matters once you get to 3. And then they spend a whole chunk of time with Anakin and Palpatine, right? Like, they just throw a ton at you. And it would have been better to pace it out a little bit more. But the story didn't really call for it or allow for it either. Like, they were leaving. There was no time.
Like, 2 more scenes. One where it's like, you know, at the beginning, you know, you have that scene. Maybe in the second act, when he has to make a decision about whether he should go save Obi-Wan or not, he calls Palpatine. Like, he's like, hey, what should I do? Because I don't know what to do. And it kind of shows that doubt more as a character. And the fact that, like, he asks his one mentor if he should save his other mentor. And then in the third act, at the very end, we just have, like, another moment of, like, Palpatine being like, I'm so proud of how far you've come. And it's just, like you can establish that relationship where, like, he keeps talking about Obi-Wan like he's a father in this film. which to me, it's Obi-Wan has always been like more of his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have a pseudo father figure like Palpatine be more of like it's a battle, because that's what it comes down to in episode 3 is do I choose between Obi-Wan, because it's at the end of the day it's not even about the Jedi Order. Do I choose between Obi-Wan or do I choose between Palpatine? Do I choose between my father or my brother? So if they would have just had a little bit more in here, and like again, you could have totally, you want to know how you make time for that, Matt? Get rid of some of the love stuff. We didn't need it.
Well, I don't think, like, yes, time-wise, sure. I just don't feel like in the story it would naturally flow.
I
Like,
think it would have
I
made
don't
his
necessarily,
fall.
I don't necessarily agree with you that, like, when when it's like, oh, should I rescue him or not? And he's like, I should call Palpatine. Like, having Padme being like, F that, I'm gonna go get him. Then it's like, oh, cool, man, I'm down. Like, that would have been way better than that was way better than what throwing Palpatine in there.
That was me just throwing out an idea. That was me just throwing out
I
like,
know.
a random thing that I pulled out of my butt.
I get that.
But even having
But
like,
I don't
a
like your
second
butt
scene,
ideas, okay? I didn't like it. I didn't like your butt idea.
But even having a scene at the end where he's like, you can have that bookend where it's like, okay, yeah, Anakin, this is what you need to think about. And like, Anakin, I'm so proud of you. Whereas like Obi-Wan's berating him, who's he going to also gravitate towards more? Something to establish the fall by episode 3 a bit more. And like maybe, again, as much as I hate saying it, because I like, feel like we shouldn't have to rely on it, but maybe that's what Clone Wars does, is it establishes their relationship better in the show. But at the same time, you shouldn't need that.
To a certain degree, yeah.
So like that's where to me it just like,
and that didn't come out before the movies anyway. That came out way after.
But that's a problem that I even have with episode 3 is that their Palpatine and Anakin's relationship doesn't make any sense. Like the turn doesn't make sense. It's so sudden, but like we'll discuss that when we get to episode 3. But also, why is Jar Jar a senator? I know I mentioned it last time, but why is he a senator? And who authorized this?
It's terrible.
And even like they're like
probably
Jar Jar.
probably Big Boss Nass or whatever his name is. Like, but Jar Jar, you going to be bomb bad senator. Yeah. Senator.
But even then,
and they just passed out.
And when he's talking to Padme, and he totally flubs that. He totally messes that up. And then she's like, Jar Jar, this is a serious business. And it's like, maybe we should find another. Are they the only 2 senators from Naboo?
Yeah, exactly. Well, one representing each of their people, I guess.
But then bring in a human one to, balance out the Gungan, because why? That's still the weirdest choice. That's out of the entire 9 to plus more movies, the weirdest choice was making Jar Jar senator.
Senator. Him just disappearing would have made way more sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
It hurts, man. It hurts sometimes. I have more, but like, yeah. What's
your next point?
I just gave you my next point. Jar Jar.
Oh, that was your next point. Okay.
Yeah, Jar Jar being a senator. I don't get it.
Okay. Fair enough. My next point is like another very awkward Anakin Skywalker Padme interaction.
Guess what my next note was?
Another very awkward Anakin Skywalker Padme interaction.
Yeah, like he literally says some weird bullcrap Jedi stuff, and she's like, "Oh my, you've grown so much," and then he throws a temper tantrum.
That's exactly what I wrote. Like, she literally is like, "My Anakin, you've grown up," and then immediately he reverts back to a child. Immediately.
Why can't I be a Jedi?
I was like, why'd you write this? Why'd you write this?
And then even more, it's like this roller coaster of stuff, because it's like, I'm mature Anakin, I'm a child, now I'm being creepy, and she actually asks him to stop looking at her like that, and he's like what? And he still doesn't. It's like, Anakin, stop!
It just makes me laugh because it's so awkward. Like, that's like the worst part, hands down, of this film. Like, it's just so incredibly awkward. Like, and
I know.
But like, they kind of make you laugh because it's like, Who, like, you have no game. And honestly, I don't expect a Jedi to have game. Fair enough. But I also don't expect you to be a huge creeper either, man. Like, show some control, dude.
It's the dark side coming through.
Yeah. Oh, but, like, it's just... like you make a good point, right? Like, I guess early on in the film here, and like just that interaction and a couple of the others, early on we get a sense for how emotional Anakin is as a character. But like, and like, I guess like you said, the darker side that kind of, you know, pokes through like the surface, right? But the problem is with this film is it's clouded by just how whiny it comes across. Like, it's more of a child, not as it doesn't communicate well as to the transition from Anakin to the Dark Lord of the Sith. It doesn't feel like stepping stones. It doesn't feel like the dark side poking through. It just feels like a kid whining. And that's where the issue with the execution comes in. Because if you executed it differently, I think that would have communicated really, really well just how much of an emotional character Anakin is. And how he is led by his emotions. Like, they're more in control of him than he is of his emotions, right? And that's a good point. That's a good point to communicate, especially going into episode 3. But again, the problem is when it just comes across as super whiny and childlike, well, now it just feels like a more of an immaturity thing and a bit of a whiny ass little bitch thing than an actual like step towards, or like tiny little steps closer and closer to the dark side.
Well, the problem is that it's the same conversation twice in the movie. It's 2 times where he's like, Obi-Wan is holding me back, and that's why I'm super angry and stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't... Maybe it would have worked once, but because the exact same thing happens, with more emotion, arguably.
Yeah.
Later on
well,
in
the
the
second
film.
time was more believable, for sure.
But even then, it's still, like, it's... We'll get there, but, like, it's still... At the end of the day, though, like, so the problem that bugs me with it, if this was Harrison Ford and Leia, and, like, because that happened in episode 5 and episode 6, where, like, he'd look at her different ways, and she'd be like, stop that. I don't like that, but you could tell it's more of, like, she just, like... You could tell Leia likes Han a lot, but also doesn't like how much of a scoundrel he is, and that's what it is. And his behavior is very scoundrel behavior. Whereas when Anakin tries to pull that kind of thing, Padme's not into it and doesn't like that behavior and voices that, and he still does it and is still creepy. And like, it just, like, if it was a Han Solo performance, I could see this moment working. It's not Han Solo, it doesn't work.
And that's exactly what it is, right? Like, if the character was just... It's just, again, it comes down to, like, just execution, how these things are executed. Like, Harrison Ford is Han Solo. Like, if he would have looked at Leia like that, that would make it incredibly creepy. But he acted like a scoundrel. He wasn't acting like a creep. He was acting like a scoundrel, no good, you know, no good
suave.
for nothing hooligan. You know what I mean? But then he also had a suave nature to him as well. Where Anakin was just, like... straight creep, man. Like, straight creep. Like, there was no charm to him. There is nothing that any female should be interested in. Like, in that whole image that he's
that
portraying.
Haircut? Oh my goodness.
Like, I think, like I told you, man, I think it's the rat tails. The chicks dig that, man.
I don't think that. I don't think that's
it's
how
the
it works,
Padawan
man.
braid, man. I think it's the Padawan braid, but no, like,
I'll get
I think just
people
the
to start growing them and see how that works.
Yeah. I just think the execution really clouded what they were trying to go for as far as the actual message of the film.
One, it was too much. It was too much emotional range in one scene. Like, it was like, you can have that, but it was just, it didn't flow. It didn't make sense. Why is he acting mature and then
next second
immature
he's
and
completely at the other end of the scale? Yeah.
Like you could argue it's like, oh, I can open up to her and stuff now, but at the same time, it doesn't, like, no, like, it doesn't work.
Yeah. It was uncomfortable again. Another weird ass uncomfortable scene.
But you know what isn't weird and uncomfortable?
What?
Dexter frickin' Jexter. I love that guy. I still love, like, you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I did not write down a note about him. I'm not sure why. Anyway, carry on.
I love that character. I love the concept of that character basically being like an old kind of war veteran who just like owns a diner now and just kind of chills out and knows a bunch of crap, and that like the idea that Obi-Wan goes and talks to him on like a regular basis and just like, hey, I'm gonna learn random crap from this old alien guy.
Like, what's going on?
I love that. I think it's great, and I know a lot of people hate him I know his CG hasn't aged that well, but the concept
that was
of the
probably
character,
the biggest thing. Yeah,
the concept of the character I love, and I people complain about the 50s diner in space. I like the little 50s diner
I have
aesthetic.
no problem with that. I
think
thought it was fine. Yeah,
and it's a fun nod
fun.
to like, it's a fun nod to George Lucas's first film, American Graffiti. Like, because that was his first film, was like based in the 50s teenage kind of comedy. So having that type of character or that type of setting, it's a fun nod, and it's not the weirdest thing I've seen in Star Wars. Like, there's a lot weirder I've seen in Star Wars, and to me, I like it, and I like just the interaction, and you can also tell, like, and to me, it's even Ewan McGregor's face during that. Like, you can tell he's actually enjoying himself in that scene. He's smiling, he's smirking, he's seeing an old friend, and he's having fun. And, like, I needed more moments like that. Like, it was good. And maybe it's because Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why I'm biased, because they're connected. But, yeah, like, I think he gets too much hate or not enough recognition as just even such a minor character. Because he's not in a lot of the movie.
Oh, yeah, like,
literally
he's in, like,
like,
next
a
to
minute.
nothing of the movie, yeah.
Heck, let's get rid of Jar Jar. Bring in more Dexter Jester.
Well, yeah, like I just thought it was a fun scene. Like, again, it didn't last too long. It didn't overstay its welcome. It got to the point. Like, it shared the information that we needed, but like they just did it in a way that was just kind of fun. Like, he could have just Googled that shit. You know what I mean? Like, he could have figured it out, I'm sure, some other way. But the way they did it was just great. This wise old, like you said, cafe owner who used to roll around in the stars. And, now he owns his cafe. Like, it was...
Also...
Yeah, I like the concept, and the execution, even in that scene, was pretty good. It was fun.
I'm pretty sure that scene was also the first time that we really heard him, like, express displeasure for droids, right? Because I want to say Dexter makes a comment about something to do with, like, the Jedi Temple droids, and Obi-Wan's like, well, if the droids were any smarter, then, none of us would be here, something like that. And it's like, okay, it's the beginning of this whole Obi-Wan doesn't like droids thing, because he doesn't like droids, and I'm cool with that as like a layer of character. But like, that's I like the scene. I think it sets up a decent amount, and I think it's a good way to even show the fact that the Jedi are actually flawed, because all the Jedi are like, hey, there's no way Kamino could exist because it's not in our system at all, therefore it can't exist, and it just shows.
Dude, again. That was my next note. I was like, just salty ass librarian over here, like, just gets really upset. Like, that part.
If it's not in our system, it doesn't
exist. Like,
okay.
Maybe someone could have deleted it. No, that's not possible. Like, okay, but then some kid was like, it's there, just go there. And Yoda's like, yeah, someone deleted it. Like, this librarian's just so huffed up on her own shit. Like, just didn't even consider the possibility. Like, it just doesn't exist. Like, okay, like that. Well, that is not like egotistical like levels of ridiculousness for you, I don't know what is. And I think that's even what Luke was talking about in The Last Jedi. Like, the Jedi were so blinded by it. I can't remember what the hell.
Well, even if you look at
but they think they're so great. They think they're so great.
If you look at Ki-Adi-Mundi, like the guy with like the big pointy head.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
The first, I don't know, man. Most people I name these people, and they're like, who? What are you talking about?
No, I know who you're talking about in that case, yeah.
But even how he is in episode 1, where it's like the Sith have been extinct, and then this one, he's like, Count Dooku wouldn't have murdered anybody. Like, he's just wrong. He's just wrong a lot. And that's, I think he's kind of the voice of... It's not in
his nature.
He's the voice of the Jedi, not necessarily being as transparent as they should.
Yeah.
And I really like the youngling Yoda scene. I really think it's a good scene. I appreciate the fact that Yoda's smart enough to like, hey, he knows the answer. Yoda could have said that too, but he's kind of teaching Obi-Wan a lesson of like, buddy, just use your brain. Hey children, what do you think? And one of them's like, I think this thing, and Yoda's like,
the kids are super smart, man. Like, just the mind of children is amazing. That's another thing I'd like to point out. I did like the Jedi world building in this episode. Because that's
I would
really
have liked...
like that's all this episode really was kind of like, because you never really saw a lot of the Jedi temple organization structure in episode 1, and you don't get like a ton of it in episode 3 because there's other shit we gotta be focusing on, like the war. But like, I just like this kind of world building of what the Jedi were actually like in this episode.
But that's where I'd like to see more. I would want more.
Well, for sure, of course.
Like, even again, I think we said this last time. If they made a prequel series, like just a prequel animated series about Anakin's time growing up in the temple, or even Obi-Wan's time growing up in the temple, I'm in. I'm fascinated by that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, hubris! I remember the Jedi's hubris. That is a perfect example for the librarian and Coyote Mundi.
Yep.
And that's hubris.
And that's 100% what it is. It's the idea that they can't... Well, of course we can't fall. We're the Jedi, and we've brought peace. And it's
of course this planet doesn't exist if it's not in our system. Like, everything in our system is the only things that ever exist ever. You're like, okay. That doesn't even make sense. But, okay. Sure.
But again, it's the idea of that... It's that idea that they're the smartest. Like, they know the best. I want to take it a step back, though, because I want to talk about Anakin and Padme's little...
Oh, that other discussion? The next creepy-ass discussion?
No, this is... So wait, are we talking about the creepy one that is... Are they on Naboo for yours, or is this when they're on the ship?
I think this is on the ship.
So my problem... I have a couple problems with this. Number one, they're going incognito. Right?
Yeah.
Why is Padme wearing, like, a crown?
A giant headdress.
Yeah. And,
yeah.
like, that makes...
Real inconspicuous.
And then on the ship, she just has it. No, and they change costumes. They change costumes on the ship. They just change their clothes. Okay, because she's wearing something completely different and has, like, a headdress thing over top of the scarf. And then they get off, and they get off of the ship, and they're wearing the same clothes they were wearing before they got on the ship. So that was kind of weird. But
practical inconsistencies.
We also don't know how many days it took, so I can kind of write that off. But also, then they get to Naboo, and then they're talking with, like, the people of like the Queen and those guys, and being like, well, what's the plan and all this kind of stuff. And then, like, they have a disagreement about what the plan is. And it's like, you guys had a whole flight, and neither of you talked about, like, hey...
What we're gonna do when we get there?
Yeah.
We'll just wing it.
Instead, Anakin's like, no, I'm in charge here. And she's like, but I'm in charge here. And it's like, why didn't you guys have this not in front of everybody else? Like, this is a great, great start to this whole operation. This is just... It didn't make any sense, man. It didn't make any sense. But what's the creepy conversation? I want to know what.
Oh, just the part where like she's like, "Oh, you've grown so much," and he's like, "You're exactly the way I remember you in my dreams." I'm like,
in my dreams.
Like, again. I just get a kick out of these because they're so creepy. It's
but
like,
it doesn't.
I can't. Like it doesn't deter her, which is strange. But like the levels of creepiness here are like unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. Like, so
the weird,
you look just the way I remember you in my dreams. Like, oh, that's nice, man. Cool. Like, that's cool. I'm sure if I said that to someone, I'm sure they'd be really jazzed about it.
Doesn't he say it earlier on that, like, he wishes he could dream about Padme instead of his mom?
Instead of his mom, yeah. Like, I'm assuming the dreams before. Like, I think maybe in that point he's referencing he has dreamt about Padme, but now he's dreaming about his mom and would rather dream about Padme. I don't know.
That whole thing is just so unclear. But it's just like, man, like, it's... At no point during this dialogue am I like, you know what? Yeah, that was a good line. Like, that worked.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's a line in this movie where I'm like, damn, that was just so well written. So the dialogue is terrible. And then, like you said, later on when they get to the palace and, like, Padme just totally shuts him down. He's like, excuse me, I'm in charge of the security. And she's like, listen up, bitch. Let me tell you how it's going to be. This is my planet. I know where I grew up. I know what's going on. We're going to do it my way. And he's like, fair enough. Yeah, you're right. I am a little bitch. Like, I was like, oh,
sorry,
man.
milady.
He just, like, it was, oh, like, just everything Anakin does. Like, there's no point in this film, like maybe during the speeder chase where like, oh, okay, Anakin's kind of like, he has his cool like moments or his moments, but there's so many scenes in this movie where they just keep forcing Anakin on you as the viewer as a creepy, uncomfortable individual. How do you connect with that? How do you connect with that? Even in You, the guy in You, and I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. I haven't watched it for a while. Like, I watched it a while back. But even that character was charming. Even that character had moments where you were rooting for him. And then he'd, like, you know, kill someone or something. And you're like, oh, that's right, you are a crazy-ass psychopath. But there had to be that balance. You had to be able to actually connect with the character or want the character to, like, you know, almost root for him. But with Anakin, it's like, there's no connection. There's no, again, empathy. There's no, like, how's a viewer supposed to care what happens to this guy? Because right now, all he's been is whiny and creepy. And even more creepy. And every time he shows up, he's creepy. So, like, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do? It's hard to make a likable character who's just a creep 100% of the time. This is really weird shit. But anyway, we'll get into more of his weird shit later on. Coming up in the next episode.
Like 2 notes.
Yeah, this is weird. Every other note is like, man, this other creepy shit he said.
Oh no, trust me, it is, because so my the next note I have is just like, I love the design of the Jedi Starfighters as well.
I agree.
Like the whole like just the triangle ship, and then like the way they like hyperdrive, where it's a detachable hyperdrive. I love that concept. Kind of annoyed that they ditched that by episode 3, but like I get it because it's progression of technology, war times, all that stuff. But like,
well, they used it in episode 3. Oh, they had a different design for the ship though. But yeah.
But like, I love the Jedi Starfighter design. I think that's it's a really cool look to it, and you kind of see like, kind of almost like a nod to the A-wing. And like, I like it. Like I like the prequel ships, and they don't get enough love. And I would have loved, like, in video games, if there was more variety. I'd like to see more prequel dogfights, because I think they would be more fun. Like, I really do. I think they would be just better.
Even the episode 3 like Jedi Starfighter designs were pretty cool. Like,
they were, the problem I had with like a lot of the episode 3 fighter designs in general is it was like leaning so heavily on lining up with episode 4.
Like, yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah, I get you there.
Because like you saw immediately where it's like, oh well, that's gonna turn into the TIE fighter. Oh,
you can
that's
see the
gonna turn into the
progress
X-wing.
of whatever. Yeah.
So that's kind of my thought. And then, like, do you have another note between any of that, or is it just back to more of creepy Anakin?
No, the shit. My next note here is actually, I thought, like, so now I'm at the part where we're talking about Camino here, and I think it's a very unique design. I actually like the design of Camino. I like it was like this ocean planet, and they lived in these like buildings that towered above the waves, and just like the whole design and aesthetic of it, like, it was very white, very clean, very shiny, but it worked for like who the cloners were. And even having, I like that room where they have all the babies in like the tubes like spinning around those giant like circle gear looking things. Like, the whole design and the ideas and the concept there, I thought Camino is just really well thought out and
minus
executed.
the CG of it, Camino is one of my favorite locations.
Like the design location of it. Yeah, the design of it is really
the rain concept is amazing and sets up really dynamic shots and really dynamic, like a dynamic environment. The Caminoans themselves, I love. Just even like, as you said, the environment and the setup, just all the like, they essentially have a tour set up of their facilities. Because they have...
More or less, yeah.
And it's great. It's amazing. I love it. I think it's great. And I wanted to see more of it. And we just never saw it again. And, like, you know... That's the thing. I think that's the problem for me, is I want to see... There's a lot of things in the prequel series I want to see a lot less of. But I want to see a lot more of the really cool stuff.
Like, the certain elements, yeah. And those are things that ultimately end up in, like, a lot of video games and stuff like that, too, right? In expanded media.
And that's where, like, even like one of my favorite maps to play is Camino in Battlefront 2.
Just like the design of it. I honestly, the only reason I hate that map, like, I like it because I like the aesthetic of Camino and the design of Camino. But however it works on that map, like, I always just have the hardest time, like, beating people that map. Like, I don't know why. That one, like, the tide always turns on us, man. Like, I don't know, something about Camino or something, or maybe just my play style, but anywho, yeah, no, I love its design. One of the other things that, like, just that section in Camino 2 where I found the story kind of, I don't know if it got off track, but it was just really odd, because I found that the story ultimately brought up more, and maybe, and this is where I'm interested in your insight, because maybe you have better insight into this,
Yeah.
and an idea of it, but I just felt the story is odd, because it brings up a lot of characters that no one knows, and it ultimately brings up more questions than it answers. Like, Obi-Wan ends up going there, because he's looking for whoever's trying to assassinate, I was going to say Queen Amidala, but like Padme, right? The senator. He finds this clone army that was commissioned by a Jedi that we don't know, as far as I know. Like, I don't know who Master Sifo Dyas is. He was never mentioned prior to this film.
Yeah.
At all. Who decided to make this clone army and 10 years ago, but then he's dead. But Jango Fett is clearly working for separatists or trying to take out the senator. It just was like this weird crisscross. Even bringing up Count Dooku at the beginning of the film. It's like, again, this is a character that we have no history with. No one knows who Count Dooku is or what he looks like or what. Like, we do now, obviously. But, like, at the time, it just, like, I don't know. I just felt it brought in characters that we didn't really know. And it ultimately ended up begging to ask more questions than were answered, if that makes sense. Like, by the end,
100%.
By the end, Obi-Wan figures out, oh yeah, it's Dooku behind this whole thing, right? But then why, when you connect the dots and be like, okay, obviously it's Dooku behind the clones, we shouldn't be using the clones. But I guess maybe the point was, like, you know, the separatists, or Palpatine as part of the plan, forced the Republic's hand, right?
No, and that's 100% what it is. Like, that's... Like,
they had to use the clones. Like, they didn't have a choice, I guess. But,
well, it's,
but then why not investigate the clones or something at that point? Because clearly they have connections directly to the enemy.
I explored the expanded lore on it, and it's actually kind of cool. It's just, it should have been in the film. It should have been set up in the first film. It should have been talked about more in the second film. There should have been, like, this ongoing investigation throughout. Like, that should have been one of the investigation points, is, like, looking into this magical clone army that just showed up.
Yeah, exactly. And then no one questioned it after that. Like, yeah, no wonder you're gonna die.
And that's basically it. Like, apparently Order 66 was originally supposed to be an order that would stop them from turning on people.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Palpatine and Dooku took over, that's when they planted the new one in. But, like, that would have been cool to explain. That would have been something cool to see. As I said, the cool things I want more of. Yeah. I want more of this. Take out the crap. Take out my next point, which is Anakin and Padme's awkward... Like, I realized at this point... No, so like, here's the thing. Here's where I'm gonna... Hope maybe we won't talk about it more. At this point, I realized I could literally skip, and I did, pretty well every single scene was just Anakin and Padme building their relationship, because the only purpose that it had to was to speed up that relationship to bring Luke and Leia into the picture by episode 3.
Yeah.
Also, in context... The I hate sand speech, out of context, it's pretty bad. In context, it technically makes sense. The problem is like, his response in talking about sand makes sense, and it doesn't come out of nowhere because she brings up sand. Right. She talks about the beaches and stuff like that. So in context, as awkward as it is, it still makes sense, but I think we always forget that because the only clip we see is, I hate sand, it's coarse, it's rough, gets everywhere, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, like, yeah, like, that's where, to me, it's like, it's still awkward and weird, but it's not as weird and awkward as I remember it being. Whereas all his other creepy interactions are a lot weirder than I remember him being.
Yeah, that's for sure,
like,
yeah.
Like, compared to everything else, I Hate Sand is one of the tamest moments of the entire franchise. And, like, that's weird. It's weird, man. It's bizarre.
Well,
but...
even in those scenes, right? Like, there's so many red flags that are throwing up. Like, not only that he's a creep, but then he's, like, all about dictatorships all of a sudden. Like, he's like, that seems like a legitimate idea. And she's like, you're teasing me. And he's like, not fucking really. I'm pretty serious about that. Like, it makes sense to me.
That's another one of my notes is just Anakin's political wisdom. He seems to think it's like, but he's like, dude, that's like every 19-year-old.
Yeah.
Every 19-year-old's like, I know about politics. And it's like, do you though? Do you? Do you really? And it's again, but actually Padme's a good foil to that, because it's like, so there's teenagers who are going to school for political science and studying politics, and they kind of know what they're talking about. Anakin's like everyone else who's like, I watched the news this one time, and therefore I know like, politics.
I'm sure about politics. Yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Anakin is just the worst. He is terrible. Well, this feels like a good place to wrap up for today. This has been a Feast of Films, the Star Wars Episode 2 special, Part 1. Come back next week for Part 2. You can find our various links down under the video, as well as the audio-only version. Those links are down there below. If you like to listen on Spotify or wherever you want to listen to, those links are down there below as well. Until next week, I'm Matt Black. With me, as always, is Ethan R. Hill, and we'll see you guys next week.